Welcome to the Thinking Ahead show on the Fitness Business Podcast. I am your host, Jason Stowo. On each Thinking Ahead show, we feature the very best in expert authors, professional speakers, and industry leaders from both inside and outside of the fitness industry. The mission of each show is to challenge you, our listeners, to step outside of your comfort zone, think a little further ahead, and turn ideas into actions. We discuss ideas, concepts, and strategies that are yet to be trending because we want you, our listeners, setting those trends, not following them. Joining us on today's show, we welcome Sunjay Nath. Sunjay is a world-renowned speaker and author who shares with us his insights on both leadership and performance. He is the best known for his trademark and book titled The 10-80-10 Principle. His methodologies combine a series of industry-leading best practices to achieve small wins and help people empower themselves. This is an incredible show that I'm truly excited to share with you, our listeners. Thank you for joining us today, Sunjay. In your own words, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your professional journey?
Absolutely. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me. Usually people thank me at the end because they're happy it's done. So hopefully we'll create some value and make people think a little differently. My professional journey is I've been a professional speaker for just shy of 27 years. I've actually never had a real job. So my educational background is I have a degree in mathematical engineering and an MBA. And most people know that engineers are well-spoken, social, emotional creatures, and it logically follows they should all become professional speakers. Obviously, I'm speaking with sarcasm. This whole realm of self-help and personal development kind of found me. When I was in high school, I was ridiculously involved. I was student council president. I was valedictorian. I ran the school store. I had the lead role in a couple of plays. Like I was that kid. And when I graduated high school and went off to study engineering, the current president of the student council approached me and said, "Hey, we want you to come back and give people a pep talk at the school about getting involved because you were super involved." And then they said, "We'll pay you to do it." And I said, "You'll pay me to speak? Normally people pay me to show up. This is really good." And what ended up happening is that snowballed, and I ended up doing a presentation, and then someone in that audience said, "Hey, will you come here and do this?" And I went and did that presentation. And someone in that audience said, "Come here and do this." And 27 years later, and over 2,000 audiences and over 1 million people in person, the phone still rings. People don't learn from their mistakes, and they keep calling back.
That sounds like good news and bad news, I suppose.
It depends, yes.
Right. So you're known the world over at this point for your development and your book and your trademark, the 10-80-10 principle. Can you share with our listeners just a brief outline of that framework and how you went about developing that?
I've been in this world for about 27 years. And anytime you do something for 27 years, it's usually for one of a couple of reasons. Either A, people have really, really good blackmail photos, or B, you legitimately like doing what you do. And again, in this realm, I love it. I eat it. I drink the Kool-Aid. I think it's so fascinating. I guess it started for me in high school. I came to this recognition that the most talented team doesn't always win the championship. And the smartest kid doesn't always get the top mark in class. And the most qualified candidate doesn't necessarily get the job or win the scholarship. And so I kind of sort of questioned, what's the difference? Why do people have good days and bad days? And so all those intrinsic, hard to measure, soft skill kind of things, I call that leadership. And that leadership, to me, can be the advantage between, first and second place or first and fifth place. And so that's kind of what started me on this whole journey. And I was like, well, how do you get the edge? Whether it's mental, whether it's physical, whether it's social, whatever it is, whether it's spiritual, it doesn't matter what it is. So that kind of where my journey started. And so I'm a constant student. Even though I've been doing this 27 years, I'm constantly reading or writing or watching YouTubes or TED Talks or whatever it is to always kind of learn. And what I found is over the years, there's been a consistency that certain themes kept on coming up time and time again. Now they've been expressed differently, they're articulated slightly different, but the core of them never changes. And there are ideas and concepts around trust and communication and believing in yourself and focusing on your strengths. And there's maybe about a dozen of these messages, these core fundamental messages that kind of come up time and time again. So literally having taken hundreds of different inputs of things that I've read or seen or witnessed or experienced or what have you, I kind of amalgamated them into this idea and this concept I call the 10-80-10 principle. And so everyone, I think, knows it intuitively. When they hear it, they kind of go, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." Or they go, "Oh, when I was working at this job or when I was dealing with this client, They go, I was doing it. And they didn't necessarily use that language. But what I try to do is just kind of put the framework together. So that's kind of the background of it. Let me kind of give you what it is. It goes like this. If you take any group of people, you can subdivide them into three groups. You got your top 10%, your bottom 10%, and your majority 80%. Okay? Top 10, bottom 10, majority 80. Let me define each group. The top 10, by their definition, they want to be there. What does that mean? It means they go early, they leave late. They never complain. You know, when you say jump, they say how high while they're in the air. These are the people so motivated and excited by life, it's annoying. These are the ones that wake up in the morning, they go look at themselves in the mirror and they get jealous. Right? So that's your top 10. On the other end of the spectrum, it's your bottom 10, where they just the opposite. They show up late, but to make up for it, they leave early. Always complaining, serious case of victimitis. It's like, it always rains when I go golfing. My spouse got me cheating. Yeah. Always complaining about something. In fact, they suffer from a very serious medical condition, which I made up. It's called optical rectamaris. It's a shitty view of the world, right? Okay, so you got your top 10, you got your bottom 10, you got a big chunk in the middle. And by their definition, they will go, and we call these guys the majority 80. And by their definition, they will go to whichever group is more empowered. Whichever group has more social influence and accolades will either shift up the majority 80 or shift them down. So if you're part of an organization where the top 10 is revered, where success is rewarded, where you're given attaboys and attagirls and pats on the back, this is called a dynamic organization. Why? Because the top 10 moves forward, but the majority 80 follows them, and the organization is dynamic. The whole thing moves forward. If you're part of an organization where the bottom 10 is revered, where it's cool to cut corners, to manipulate the system, to cheat, to steal, to lie, I call that government. Oh, sorry. It's called a static organization. But because the top 10, the bottom 10 get empowered, they suck the life out of the organization. The organization gets stuck, gets stagnant, they're static, and they go nowhere. People have seen this time and time again. Have you ever been to a live production of some sort, and you ended up giving a standing ovation to a production that you didn't really think deserved a standing ovation? And universally, people always say, of course that happened. Why? I'll tell you what happened. You see, you go into this presentation, chances are you're a majority 80. And if you ended up sitting next to the mother of the lead role, then what happens is, as soon as the curtain call, or they're doing their bows at the end, the mother stands up, she starts clapping, hooting and hollering, and throwing roses. So in this dynamic, she's what we call a top 10. She's very empowered. And by definition of you sitting next to her and being a majority 80, you're going to kind of stand up because of social norm. You don't want to be rude. Maybe you were talking to her earlier. You know it's your kid. You want to support her, whatever it is. But the top 10 was empowered. The majority 80 starts to follow. So here's the really remarkable, amazing thing I think about this whole 10-80-10 concept is once you have the majority of the group, that's your top 10 plus your majority 80. I call that your critical mass. Once you have the critical mass, the bottom 10 does one of two things. Either A, they go, wait for me, I want to join, and they run after the group. Or they go, B, this sucks, I'm out of here, and they leave. And you get that natural attrition. So let's go back to this theatrical production. The top 10 stands up and they're cheering, they're going to give a standing ovation no matter how good or bad it was. It has nothing to do with the production. It has to do with the relationship. So they're top 10, they're all over it. The majority 80, as long as the top 10 are screaming and yelling and clapping loud enough, they're going to follow. Then the bottom 10 does one of two things. Either they go, oh, fine, everyone's doing it. They stand up and they start clapping, or they kind of look at their watch, or they feel embarrassed and they sneak out. So that's kind of the dynamics. And that's how, the top 10 works. But we've all been influenced by the bottom 10. Give you an example of that. I'm sure you've all been in a presentation that was a complete and utter waste of your time and resources. Like, you just want to scratch your eyes out. Your ears are bleeding. The delivery is horrible. The content is ridiculous. It's just a waste of everyone's time. And what happens is you look around and most of the people in the audience are either having side conversations or they pulled out their phone and they're texting away. And what do you end up doing? You end up either joining a conversation, pulling out your phone. So what happened in that scenario? Well, the bottom 10 are more revered. They have more social influence and accolades. That's the majority 80 kind of starts to follow them. And so that's what it is at a high level, but it applies to really just about anything. A lot of this dynamic comes from this idea of action follows action. In fact, the way I like to express it is it's not an idea or a concept I made up. Action follows action. I would argue one of the first people to really get credit for saying it was Sir Isaac Newton. And if you remember, and that's like 1600s, and he had 3 laws of motion, and the first motion said something to the effect of, and we're going back to 9th grade science, folks. I apologize in advance, but he said something to the effect of, a body in motion tends to stay in motion, a body at rest tends to stay at rest. Or another way of saying that is he said, action follows action. Body in motion tends to stay in motion. Or inaction follows inaction. Body at rest tends to stay at rest. And so what happens is, if everyone's standing, we kind of tend to join and stand. When everyone else is sitting, we tend to join and kind of go, well, I don't want to be the first. I don't want to look silly. This is what the concept of peer pressure is. Look, well, my friends were jumping off the cliff, so I jumped. Or, no one else was dancing, I don't want to look stupid. Action follows action, inaction follows inaction. You go back to the idea of working out. When people can sustain a workout, it's because they're working and focusing on their top 10. Meaning, if they are fast twitch versus slow twitch. So if you're a slow twitch fiber type of person and you like to do long, slow runs, and that's you get more excited about that than doing sprints. If you have a trainer that forces you to do sprints, or in my language, forces you to play in the bottom 10, you will burn out. They might yell at you, they may intimidate you, they may coerce you, they may trick you, they may bribe you, and you may do it for a short period of time. But the sustainability will not be there because it's bottom 10. And what happens is when you spend your time on the bottom 10, you eventually run out of resources or you burn it.
That is an excellent example. That's a really great example. So what would be our, as leaders of our organizations, right? And we all observe this, whether I'm sure none of us use the framework 10-80-10 example, but we all see the top performers versus the laggards, if you will. So as leaders, what is one thing that we could take back and just kind of start to influence now to start to move the needle so that the 80 begins to follow this 10%? How can we influence that as opposed to just observe it?
And that's the thing, is a lot of times people want to focus on the bottom 10. They go, it's a squeaky wheel. I'm not very good at cardio, but I'm really good at lifting weights. So I should work on the cardio. And yes, kind of. But the question is, how do you do it? An example I use when I'm going and presenting is, if you are trying to, say the boss of the organization comes to you and says, hey, Jason, congratulations. You're now responsible for running the blood drive clinic we're doing in the organization. So what's going to happen is, and basically what that means is you have to get people in this organization to give blood. Okay? In that room of your organization, there's a 10-80-10 split to giving blood. Top 10, bottom 10, majority 80. Who are the top 10? The top 10 are people who normally give blood. Okay? And I want to emphasize this. This is about the action and not the behavior or the personality of the people. I don't care if they're a jerk or a saint. I care if they give blood or not. So if they give blood, by definition, they're a top 10. They could be a jerk giving blood. They could be a saint giving blood. I don't care. And by the way, they're probably both. All I care is you give blood. So your top 10 people give blood. Your bottom 10 people don't give blood. Why? It doesn't matter. I don't care what the rationale is. I just care you don't give blood. That makes you a bottom 10. Doesn't make you a bad person. Makes you a bottom 10. Okay, so top 10, bottom 10, majority 80. Who are the majority 80? I'm going to guess the majority 80 are most of the people listening to this podcast. And they work like this. If your friends harass you enough, and you will go give blood. Okay, so if you are the blood drive clinic champion, who does it make most sense to target? The top 10, the bottom 10, the majority 80. And they all make sense. You see, if I can get the bottom 10 to do it, I can get anyone in the organization to do it. So I can give the guy who has religious objections not to give blood, I can get anyone to give blood. Makes sense. Majority 80, what about them? Well, they make a lot of sense too. Because if let's say I have a hypothetical organization of 100 people. If I can get 80 of the 100 people to give blood, it's a pretty successful blood drive clinic. Totally makes sense. All right, well, what about the top 10? Well, the top 10, when I ask people, if you spend most of your day with your top 10 people, your top 10 clients, your top 10 customers, your top 10 members, would you agree that your stress level goes down? And people at the university always say yes. And I said, would your job satisfaction go up? And people go, absolutely. So if I could work with my top 10 and empower them to create an army, to create an attraction for the majority 80 to follow, does that make sense? Totally does. So being more specific, if I go to a bottom 10 person and I try to get them to give blood, and this is typically what we do, we identify the bottom 10 people around us, and we have this little voice in our head, and we may not use this language, but it's something like this. We label people. We constantly do it. We're like, oh, her right there. She's bottom 10. Again, we may not say bottom 10. We may say, oh, she's toxic. Oh, avoid him. Oh, he's trouble. But if I identify Billy over there as a bottom 10, I'm going to go, oh, Billy's a bottom 10. I'm going to win him over. And we have this little voice in our head that says, we can do this. And then we find the Billies, and then we corner them, and we give them 45 minutes of our best material. Yo, 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 Billy, 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 how you doing? You want to save a life? How about a free muffin? How about save a life? How about give some blood? Go team, go, go, Billy. It's your birthday. Go, Billy. 45 minutes later, does Billy change his behavior? And the answer is no. He's not even listening to you. He's trying to do a mental grocery list, kind of pausing, waiting for you to pause and go, can I go now? And in fact, targeting the Billies or the bottom 10 leads to what I call the triple whammy. 3 whammies. Whammy number 1, does Billy change his behavior? And the answer is no. Whammy number 2, how do I feel? I've just spent 45 minutes trying to convince him of something I'm passionate and excited about, and he spits on me. Other than wet, how do I feel? Right? Frustrated, exhausted, demotivated, all that other garbage. That's whammy number 2. Whammy number 3, here's the most powerful one that most people forget about. And the question is, how does everyone else around Billy feel? And the answer is ignored. You see, all this time and energy I was wasting with that energy vampire, I could have been making a difference to the people around it. But instead, by focusing on the bottom 10, you lead to the triple whammy. He doesn't change his behavior. You get demotivated. People around him feel ignored. Okay, so the bottom 10 approach, not the most effective approach. Well, what about the majority 80 approach? Well, 100 people in our pretend organization, there's only one of me, and there's 80 in the majority 80. So if I'm going to connect with 80 of them, I have a limited time, limited resources. The only way I can really do that is by running through the halls of the organization going, give blood, 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 go team, go give blood, yay. And my question is, based on that interaction, will people give blood? And the answer is, maybe, possibly, probably not. Hypothetically could happen. I don't think it will, but it might, but I doubt. And the reason I say that so indecisively is because the majority 80 is a very large spectrum of people, right? From I'm on the fence to convince me. The I'm on a fence people, you might get them, but only because of the information, not because of the relationship. So they're just as likely to give blood if they saw an email in their inbox, a poster on the wall, or had you running through the halls going, give blood, give blood, give blood. The people who are on the convince me in the lower half of the majority 80, you're not going to win them over. Because in order to get the rest of those people, you need what we call a transformational relationship. And one of the bases of transformational relationship is quality time. And you running through the halls going, give blood, give blood, give blood, give blood, give blood, does not count as quality time. Okay, so hold on. The bottom 10 approach, triple whammy, majority 80 approach, you're chugging along pretty darn slowly. Well, what about the top 10? Okay, I'll make up another character. This is Sally. Sally's the top 10. And if I say, hey, Sally, have you thought about giving blood? If Sally's truly a top 10, before I finish that sentence, she's halfway out the door. Going, where do I go? What do I do? How can I do? I can get a free juice and save a life? I'm totally in. Now, here's the thing is, as a top 10, she's going to go, she's going to give blood. She's going to come back, she's going to sit down in her desk. And here's the best part. She will become a champion of the very behavior she was trying to instill in other people. She's going to sit down, she's going to have a muffin in one hand, a juice in the other. She's going to elbow both her neighbors and go, I just saved a life. And you can do it too, and here's what you have to do. So from a theoretical standpoint, let me explain what just happened. The top 10 got empowered. And as a result, the majority 80 started following. Once you hit that critical mass, that's your top 10 plus your majority 80. Once you hit that critical mass, the the bottom 10 does one of two things. Either they go, hey, wait for me, I want to give blood, or they say, what the heck kind of blood-sucking organization is this? I'm out of here. And they leave. And either way, it's a desired result. So more specifically for your listeners, what does that mean? It means, hypothetically, if you have a club, a gym, and you're trying to increase your membership, right now, the entire population of the world, with regards to your membership, falls into a 10-80-10 split for your top 10. The top 10 are the people who are your loyal members. They're there 5 times a day. They sing your praises from the hilltops. They love you. They think you're amazing. That's your top 10. Who are your bottom 10? Your bottom 10 are likely people who are just as loyal to another club. And your majority 80 are going to be the people kind of in between. So the hypothetical, and I've worked with organizations many times doing this, and I say, let's play a game. Pretend you have a $100 gift basket. And this is your marketing campaign. You've invested $100 in this marketing campaign, and you've decided you're going to give the gift basket to someone as promotion to try to get more people to join your club because you want to increase membership. Who does it make most sense to give it to? A top 10, a bottom 10, majority 80. And most people have this logic that says, well, it should be the bottom 10 because my top 10 people, they're already, they love me. They're still coming. This is fantastic, right? Majority 80, yeah, they might come anyways, but the bottom 10, that's where it's at. Well, that's what happens if you give it to a bottom 10. I'll tell you what's going to happen. If you give it to someone who is ridiculously loyal to another club, they're not going to get the basket and go, oh, a fruit basket. I should switch clubs. It's not going to happen. They're going to get the basket, and if it's good and they like it, they're going to eat it. And if it looks cute and they're going to someone's house for dinner, they're going to re-gift it. But what it is not going to do is it's not going to make them disloyal, unloyal, I don't know what the word is. It's not going to make them ditch their club because they already love their club. So what you've just done is you've wasted $100. On the flip side, if you give it to your top 10, what do? They're going to appreciate it. They already love you, but it gives them another reason to love you. And it gives them another reason the next time they go to the poker game or the hair salon or the grocery store and they're chatting with their friends socially, they're going to go, you're not going to believe what my club did for me. They did this because out of loyalty, out of respect, out of whatever it is. If that top 10 member is now talking to a majority 80 population person, this is how the conversation goes. They go, you're not going to believe what they did. They gave me this fruit basket. It was such a nice thing. I totally unexpected. Oh my goodness, I love it. Majority 80 goes, my club doesn't do that. Tell me more about your club. And that is much more effective. That right there is worth your $100 without question. Because that's how you win them over. Then your top 10 member goes, you should come and check it out. We got this trial membership, whatever it is. They come, they check it out, they love it. Then the majority 80 moves up to a top 10. And eventually, once you hit that critical mass, your top 10 plus your majority 80, when everyone in the population is going, we have the best club in the world, and here's why. That's when the bottom 10 goes, your club does what? Well, my guys never do this. Tell me more about it. And that's how you get to the bottom 10. It's by the empowerment of the top 10. So to answer your question really succinctly now, you said, what can your members do? Your members can focus on the top 10. Now, one big caveat here that I really want to emphasize is this. Before you can apply the 10-80-10 principle, you need to understand what is your desired result. What I mean by that is, what is the goal? What is the mission? What is the vision? Because if this changes, the top 10 and bottom 10 can swap very quickly. So again, let me give an example. I was doing a presentation one time, and this guy challenged me. He's like, okay, so hold on a second. You're trying to tell me this whole 10-80-10 business is all about focusing on your strengths. And I said, absolutely, that is primarily what it's about. And he said, so you're saying if I'm coaching a soccer team of a bunch of 4-year-olds, I should only play my best players. And I said, hold up, time out, back at the bus. What's the desired result? Because if the desired result is to win, then yes, you play your best player. But I'm going to make the argument that when you're teaching 4-year-olds how to play soccer, it's not about winning. It's about sportsmanship. It's about skill development. It's about camaraderie. It's about communication. It's about trust. It's about all that stuff. And so that is why when we're training and coaching 4-year-olds for soccer, we reward the best behavior. It showed good sportsmanship. It showed team building. It showed efforts in terms of skill development. Those are the desired results. You'd be surprised how often I've sat around a C-suite table and everyone assumes it's the same desired result. You go around and the one guy or girl says, what's the desired result? Well, it's the bottom line, go making profit. And by the way, I'm not judging. I don't care what the desired result is, but it needs to be consistent. Oh, it's about profit. And then I go to the next guy or girl and I say, what's it about? Oh, no, it's about environmental sustainability. Okay. And I ask the third person, they go, it's about organizational culture. Because if our employees don't want to be here and they don't work for us, we don't have an organization. And I go to the fourth one and they go, it's about corporate social responsibility. We got to be pillars of the community. There's nothing wrong with any of those four. But if I say you have $1 million to invest in your resources right now and you're going to focus on your top 10, each one of those 4 people is going to have a different desired result. Let's bring it back to your podcast listener. Then you have a partner and the two of you run a club together. If one of you is saying it's all about finances and we got to keep our head above water, and again, I'm not judging. I don't care. That's a very noble thing. Fantastic. And the other person goes, no. It's not about money right now. It's about membership. We got to increase the membership. We'll make the money later. Because you have 2 different focuses, your bottom 10 and your top 10 will change and you're going to have conflict. So again, to answer your question, what should they be doing? Be crystal clear on what the desired result is. Identify who the top 10 are and put your resources into your top 10.
That was incredible advice and a fantastic example. The way you laid that out is very clear and obvious what the next action should be right after this podcast to our leaders and owners. That was great.
Sorry, let me caveat. The actual best advice is they should call me and hire me, and then let others. Okay,
that's right. Absolutely. So you had touched on a little while back the difference between a dynamic organization and a static organization. So can you talk a little bit about the characteristics of and differences between the two, so we kind of identify where we should start changing our culture or our process?
Absolutely. This comes down to this. What is static and what is dynamic? It is the measure of the culture within the organization. And to be a static organization, static just means it's stuck. It's going nowhere, right? Or it goes down. A dynamic organization moves forward. How do you get to static or dynamic? Has to do with action follows action and inaction follows inaction. An analogy I often use is I say, if you take a cup of coffee and you put an ice cube in the coffee, what happens? People go, well, the ice cube melts. Yes, that's because the coffee is more predominant than the ice cube. But if I take that same cup of coffee and I go bring it to the North Pole, what happens to the coffee? And the answer is the coffee freezes. Right. So it's not about the coffee, it's about the environment of the coffee. So the coffee has the ability to melt, but the coffee also has the ability to freeze. The best way I can explain this is, it's got to be about 25 years ago, I was asked to speak to an organization called Teens Tackling Tobacco. And they're running a big symposium. They called me up and said, Sunjay, we're running this symposium. We want you to come and speak. I said, great, how can I help? They said, when you speak, we want you to explain the way peer pressure works. I said, why? They said, our research shows that 90% of young people start smoking as a result of peer pressure. So we figure if they understand how the force works, they might make different decisions. I said, no problem. Let's just make sure we have the same working definition of peer pressure. I alluded to this earlier in the podcast, but my definition of peer pressure is action follows action and inaction follows inaction. And she said, fantastic, say that. And then she said, wait, no, don't. I said, what? She said, you're speaking to students. She said, don't say it, show it. It'll stick better. Don't say it, show it, it'll stick better. I said, yeah, I got an idea. So that day when I went to do the presentation, on stage with me, I brought 4 chairs. And at one point in my talk, I said, ladies and gentlemen, I need 4 volunteers. And I grabbed my 4 volunteers and I said, excellent, I want the 4 of you to come and stand in front of these 4 chairs. And they did. And I started telling a story. And when I got to a certain word in the story, 3 of the 4 volunteers sat down. And the reason they sat down is because, well, I cheated. You see, before the presentation, I went up to 3 people and I said, 1, 2, 3, I need you 3 to do me a favor. In the middle of my presentation, I'm going to ask for some volunteers. I want you to volunteer. I'm going to ask you to come and stand in front of a chair. I want you to stand in front of the chair. I'm going to start telling a story, get to a certain code word. When I say the word, will you just sit down on the chair? And they went, no problem, no problem, no problem. I said, great. Got to that part of my talk, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, I need a bunch of, 4 volunteers. A bunch of hands went up, and I said, excellent. The 4 of you to stand in front of these chairs. They did. I started telling a story. Got to that certain word. 3 of the 4 volunteers sat down. Guess what the 4th one did? And the answer is obviously they sat down. Why? Well, come on, it made a lot of sense. The chair was there. Everyone else was sitting. Why not sit? Right? When I'm speaking to students, I've used this example so often because there's all kinds of powerful messages. Right? I can say, debrief it this way. I can say, the beer was there. Everyone else was drinking. Why not drink? Or the vape was there. Everyone else was getting vaporized. Why not vape? Right? And when I want to bug them, I say, why don't we do this? The book was there. Everyone else is reading. Why not read? But it's true though. People can say that. Everyone else is working out. Why not work out? You can create that environment. And like I said, I found this to be so powerful. But what amazed me was every time I've ever run this for students, I've always had an adult that was in the room, parent, a teacher, an educator, some sort of an adult that would say, what a great example. Because in this day and age, the power of peer pressure is so powerful, it's nutty. Sure, I'm glad I'm not a kid. Sure, I'm glad I'm not a kid. It's not as though it mysteriously disappears as peer pressure. People graduate from high school. It's like, here's your high school diploma. Can I have the peer pressure back? Thanks. I'll stick it in my back pocket. So it still exists. And wanting to prove a point to myself, I was speaking for an audience. I was speaking for an AGM of a health unit. So I had a room full of about 250 health professionals, doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, smart, educated, sophisticated people. And like I said, I wanted to prove a point to myself. So at one point in my talk, I said, ladies and gentlemen, I need 4 volunteers. And I grabbed my 4 volunteers. I said, excellent, I want the 4 of you to come and stand in front of these 4 chairs. And they did. Started telling my story, got to that certain word of the story, and my 3 plants sat down. Now, what I did not know at the time, the 4th guy that I ended up picking, turns out he was the director of the health unit. He was the biggest wig in that room. He had education, he had title, he was the man. So I got to that point, 3 of them sat down, he's standing up, and you'll never guess what he did. And for people to guess, he stood up, he sat down, he kind of did both and he did neither, and I couldn't have scripted this any better. So I got to the word, 3 of them sat down, and this is what he does. He looks to his left, he looks to his right, he then said, hey, he told us to stand. Then he sat down. So he recognized publicly what he was doing was wrong. Then he shamed his coworkers, and yet he still sat down. Why? Because the simple idea, the simple motion of action follows action, and inaction follows inaction, transcends your formal authority, your education level, how much you can bench press, and how you part your hair. It's simple. As a human being, when everyone else is doing it, people want to join. When no one else is doing it, it's harder to be the first. So if you want to create a static organization, you empower the staticness, or you be complacent by silence as approval, and you allow it to go on and people will follow it. If you want to create a dynamic organization, create a dynamic club, create a dynamic culture, when you see the top 10 behaviors that you like, you reward them, you empower them. This is why we have loyalty programs. We're trying to reward the behavior in which we want to see. Employees of the month, member of the month. This is exactly what we're trying to do. We're going, this is the top 10, because if we can empower that, we know the majority 80 is going to follow. We hit that critical mass, the bottom 10 are going to leave, or they're going to jump on and join.
That's excellent. That's really, again, just home run advice. I really do appreciate these examples. I'm going to switch gears real quick because I heard you recently speak on something I think is really relevant right now. And it's this menace of feeling increasingly more stressed around this impossible task of continually trying to get more done with the same and often now fewer resources, especially this past year. So, can you tell us a little bit more? You had mentioned something about performance framework that helps us to kind of refocus our organization around strengths and reduce stress?
I'm going to start with what's the desired result? Because a lot of organizations during the pandemic switched focuses, but they didn't understand they did. Prior to pandemic, there were organizations chugging along, doing really well, making lots of money, and their goal was to continue doing the same. And money wasn't an issue, so they were talking about increasing, customer retention or loyalty or whatever it was. But then all of a sudden, the pandemic hit, and especially in your world, it became about survival and not about thriving. So the desired result changed. So before, when it was the top 10 was about focusing on, it was more of a giving thing. Finances weren't an issue. You could spend more, you could market more, you could do all that kind of stuff. Then circumstances changed, the desired result changed because it was about survival, and a lot of people did the same thing. They were marketing and they were trying to do this, and that's not what their top 10 was anymore. It became about desired result was survival. So the question is, what is it you need to do with regards to survival? In fact, the framework, as I explain it, is I say you take your time. This is what you have to do. 3 steps. ACT, awareness, choice, time. Awareness, choice, time. Awareness. What do you got to be aware of? You got to be aware of 3 things, and the first one's the most important. First one is, what is the desired result? Right? What is the goal, mission, vision? We talked about this earlier, because you got to be clear on that. The second question is, who is my top 10? Which means, who are the people on the team, internally or externally, who are exhibiting behaviors that are supporting me and pushing me towards this goal? And then the third piece is, who are the bottom 10? Again, who are the people who are exhibiting behaviors right now that are drawing me and pulling me away? Again, I want to emphasize, it doesn't mean they're good or bad people. So, A, awareness, what do you want? What's the top 10? What's the bottom 10? C, choice. You're going to make a conscious choice to do 2 things. You're going to neutralize the bottom 10, and you're going to empower the top 10. Say it one more time. You're going to neutralize the bottom 10. You're going to empower the top 10. I'm using very specific words, and I want to define what I mean by that. When you neutralize something, here's the key. You spend the minimal amount of time, energy, attention, and thought so it no longer draws resources. Let me say that one more time. You spend the minimal amount of time, energy, attention, and thought so it no longer draws resources. This is not about fixing the problem. This is not converting a weakness into a strength. This is plug the leaking boat, slap a Band-Aid on the blood, and quit wasting time on the bottom 10 because they will suck every resource out of you before they ever convert. If you're a personal trainer and you're dealing with a client who does not want to be there because their significant other forced them, or they lost a bet and they had to do a New Year's resolution and all that kind of stuff, and you want it more badly than they do, that is a bottom 10 dynamic. And in the long run, you burn out, you lose resources, and it does not help you grow your business, and it does not help him or her because he or she is not ready to play. That is bottom 10. What you want to do is neutralize it. What does that mean? It means if they've hired you, you put the minimal amount of giving them what they need so that you're not invested in it mentally and it doesn't take its toll on you. So it's, all right, when you're ready, here's the list, which is very different from a top 10. What's the top 10? The top 10 is you spend the maximum amount of time, energy, attention, thought, and resources. This is where you're doing the one-on-one. This is where you're doing the spotting. This is where you're empowering them so much and that they become your test case. They become your referral engine because everyone sees the physique and they're glowing with energy and they're flirting with that 6-pack and everyone goes, how did you do it? And they go, my personal trainer. And that's where you want to invest in your resources. So you want to neutralize the bottom 10 and you want to empower the top 10. So A, awareness. What do I want? Who's my top 10? Who's my bottom 10? C, choice. Neutralize the bottom 10, empower the top 10, and the T and ACT stands for time. And what that means is you got to do this long enough. Because if you do this long enough, by empowering the top 10, the majority 80 follows. Once you hit that critical mass, your top 10 plus your majority 80, the bottom 10 does one of two things. They either run after you going, wait for me, I want to join, or they go, I'm out of here, and they leave. Either way, it's a desired result.
Wow. That's, again, thank you so much. So I'm going to shift gears on you one more time. So on my show, and when I get to speak myself, I always talk about the importance of structure and morning routines. And, you've been inducted in the Speaker Hall of Fame. You've spoken to 2,000 audiences, I think over 1 million people in those audiences. And you've mentioned to me offline that you've lost 40 pounds and you're also a black belt in Taekwondo. So how do you manifest all this success in your life? And is there a routine that you follow to allow you to continually set the bar higher for yourself?
So first thing I would question is, what is success, right? So and the reason why I say that, I'm not trying to sound philosophical. I'm trying to say that one of the easiest ways to set someone up for failure is to pick a goal that someone wants for you rather than you want for yourself. So if your significant other wants you to stop smoking, but you secretly really don't, you think it's a good idea, but you're not really, maybe later, you will not succeed. So the question is, what is success for you? For some people, they like being what other would consider to be very bland and very simple and all that stuff, but that's their definition of success, which means golden. It's all the power to them. For me personally, yeah, I am constantly having something that is quirky and silly or maybe not that I'm working towards. And sometimes it's a business goal or a financial goal or a relationship goal or a physical goal or whatever. As an example, I've been an avid ultimate player for many, many years. Ultimate Frisbee. Love Ultimate Frisbee. I think it's the most fantastic sport. And I've had a goal. I have 3 sons. And I've had a goal that I wanted to be relatively competitive enough that I'd be able to play with my sons. And so obviously, as you age, things deteriorate. And I'm finding them slower. A few years ago, they were suggesting that I needed knee surgery and that I had to go in a physio and try to build up knee strength, got away without it. So it's just a goal because it's consistent with my personality and my quirkiness. I have a ridiculously high value on being a dad. Right? So people that know me know that I'm always talking about my kids. I love it. I'm huge value on that. So this is a goal for me. Now, other people go, it's not a goal. It's a silly thing. It's a whatever. Fine, but that's my goal. So I think that when you pick things that are aligned with who you are, or again, my language, when the desired result is consistent with your personality, then the hows don't become that important. They kind of take care of themselves. So when you have that why, the desired result consists with your personality, the routine, I find that if you're crystal clear on what you want, the routine takes care of itself. If you really want to be an Olympian and it's part of your DNA and you love it and you eat it and you drink it and you breathe it, people don't have to remind you to train. So when you're picking things that are consistent with who you are and your personality, you don't need to be reminded. You don't need a schedule. In fact, it reminds me of a study that I'd heard about. They took a bunch of kids and they made the kids, half the group stared at a cookie for like 20 minutes or half an hour. And the other group, half group, stared at cauliflower for half an hour. Then after half an hour, they took the kids and they got them to do puzzles that were slightly beyond their capability. So what they were measuring was they were trying to see how long before the kid quit the puzzle. And what they found with statistical significance was the kids that stared at the cookie didn't last as long because willpower is a finite resource. Because they were looking at the cookie going, I can't have it, I can't have it, I can't have it. That burns out. So they were giving up on the puzzle easier. So going back in terms of creating routines for yourself, this is why the routine, if you want sustainability in your life and you want routine, that not forcing yourself to do it, and you want longevity and consistency with it, you have to be picking goals that are consistent with who you are and what you want. Not what society thinks you should do, not what your significant other, your BFF, your parents, what you think you're supposed to do. But when you can truly answer that question, what's important to you, then it becomes much more consistent.
Again, terrific advice and terrific insights of how to frame that in your own mind. So as we near the end of our time today, is there one piece of actionable advice? So, our owners and operators and managers are going to leave this podcast and be excited. And they're going to walk into their club and have this opportunity to do something slightly different. What would be that one piece of advice that you'd give for us to utilize today?
Yeah. So again, I would go to this idea of be clear on what you want. What's your desired result? Are you trying to grow your club versus are you trying to make people so happy that people are or there's a lineup to get in, and you want to keep it smaller, like whatever that is, and recognize who are the ambassadors, who are the top 10 people, or what are the top 10 activities that are doing that right now, and empower those. At the same time, the things that are sucking the life out of you, do not try to fix them. Try to neutralize them. Again, what I would do is identify your top 10, your bottom 10, neutralize the bottom 10, which means minimum amount of time, energy, attention, thought, so it no longer draws resources. Power the top 10, and you will see yourself stair step toward your desired result. If that seems overwhelming, I'm more than happy to help. I think my contact information will be made available. I'm happy for a consultation. I can come speak to your group, however I can help, please let me know.
So that was my very last question, actually. So of course, we're going to have your contact information on the show page. But while we're here, what's the best way that our listeners can reach out to you after the show?
So my email is my name. It's Sunjay@sunjaynath.com. And that's my website too, sunjaynath.com.
I can't thank you enough for this show. This is tremendous resource and tremendous value. And again, just thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me. All the best.
Good day.